So that image, the background image behind me in the New York Times article is the house in question that I'm talking about tonight. So the Apex Point House in Tasmania, with this extraordinary wind-prone heathland, very, very similar to that remarkable biodiverse landscape in southern Western Australia. But of course, here we're in Tasmania. We're actually 10 k's from Port Arthur, right down on the Tasman Peninsula. We're on a 3.8 hectare site, so it's a really large site. And when you stand on the site, you just naturally sort of gravitate to looking to the southwest, which happens to be where all the prevailing winds come from, which are typically around about 40 knots, which made the house quite hard to build. This is a view looking from the leeward side of the house, because it has a very distinct leeward side as opposed to a windward side, looking through the house, and we see Wedge Island, and if it was a clear day, we'd see Bribie Island beyond. So yes, it's a remarkable, stunning looking house. I'm very proud of it. And this image gives the impression that we arrived at a pristine site and colonised it nicely with a bit of mid-century modern architecture. Well, actually, it was a bit more involved than that. We could have chose anywhere to build on that 3.8 hectare site. If we had chose in the middle of the heath, we would have destroyed it. Just like those black and white photos I showed earlier on, we would have just annihilated it, because the movement patterns around the house, just walking, but driving, any kind of access to it would have created a huge wind erosion problem. The other thing is that this is my view. We're inhabiting these sites for the first time in a sedentary sense. I mean, in the history of the site. It doesn't matter how many thousand years you go back. It's the first time. And as architects, we've really got to stop and think about what we're actually doing. It's the first time someone has actually lived there in a sedentary sense. It doesn't matter how good or bad your architecture is. You've got to start with that point of view. So this site was actually a very degraded dune blowout. So it was just four-wheel drivers, probably over the last 20 years when four-wheel drives really took off, that drive over the site to get to the fishing spots and so on. It's about a 3-metre deep hole. We built the house on that hole. The mapping was actually incorrect in the Tasmanian sort of overlays. It said that it was high protection biodiversity. Our landscape ecologist, bushfire assessor, determined that it was actually low biodiversity woodland, but still remarkable trees. So that enabled us to actually build up close to that woodland on the actual ridge line of the dunescape. Now, what's distinctive about bushfire regulations in WA and Tasmania in particular is that unless you've got an extremely high level of protection of vegetation, or you're against a fence line, which is against an estuary reserve and so on, you've just got to clear up to 20 metres around the house, roughly speaking, to create a BAL 29 project. So meaning a cleared low fuel area, which emits, supposedly BAL 29 or 29 kilowatts per square metre of radiant heat. And then a house, you can build whatever BAL house you like, but it can't be any lower than BAL 29. Now, this is the other end of what, Glenn Murcutt experienced at Palm Beach, where he had to protect every single eucalyptus anguifera. Actually, I don't think they're eucalyptus, but the anguifera trees. And literally we see architecture like this. It's virtually impossible to build houses like this in WA and Tasmania. So what do we do if we want to celebrate the biodiversity? Well, one thing I did was I got on the Australian standard, spent many years on that, and got this new way of assessing vegetation. So now when we're looking at forest, woodlands and rainforests, we classify the unmanaged understory rather than either the canopy drip line or the trunk line of trees. So this is really significant, because what was happening before 2018 version of the standard is people were assessing the BALs from the edge of the tree, and that house would suddenly be flame zone when really it will say BAL 29 or even lower. So a very, very expensive house to build. And invariably that would just trigger the removing of the tree. And the tree is just an innocent party to all this, because it's being misread as being the problem. But really it's what the tree drops that's the problem, and that's pretty darn easy to clear up. So let's not mistake trees for what they drop. So if we actually look at a cross-section through this BAL 29 project in Tasmania, we see how the actual vegetation management works. We've got the wind-prone coastal heath on the left-hand side. We've got the eucalyptus woodland on the right-hand side, and we're managing the understory, which was actually low biodiversity anyway. It was an invasive species of ferns. So we're actually able to keep the trees in there for amenity, for mitigating wind erosion and wind pressures and so on. and keep the biodiversity. So it's a BAL 29 project, and importantly, it's in Tasmania. If we were to cite this same project, and in Tasmania, we are just dealing with a moderate level of bushfire. That's the design fire in AS 3959. As soon as that fire intensity goes up, or the FFDI goes up, then we've got a BAL 40 house, and when it gets into catastrophic, which we do get those conditions in Tasmania, then the house is effectively exposed to flame zone. So I had to make sure there was some level of redundancy in the design that didn't just deal with the Tasmanian FFDI of 50 at BAL 29. I actually made the house more resilient than what it needed to be. We see the overall scheme here with the fire appliance turnaround circles where the water tanks are and so on. I'm coming down the home straight here. We see the house in its site. This is during construction still, so we don't see the managed ferns on the right-hand side here, and we don't see the regrowth on the other side. We see here the wind-protected leeward's courtyard. The courtyard's made by the house and the vegetation. We looking to the north, and importantly, the trees are here moderating, not just providing shade and increasing the moisture in the landscape around the house, which is great for bushfire risk mitigation, but reducing glare and, as I said, reducing wind pressures on the house. It's a narrow house. It's derived from the geology of the site as much as many other factors. It's site welded steel, which has got a very high resilience in bushfire. 10 mil steel is pretty much good for flame zones, so that's another aspect of it. The cladding doesn't have any external fixtures, so the roof and the walls are actually clipped on, and the glass is actually just glued on to the steel frame. You're probably thinking, okay, with a high fire, the glue is going to melt, windows are going to pop out. Well, let's just wait and see, shall we? I very much doubt it, because all the glue is protected by fire-rated silicon. So this is actually my last slide. So I just want to make some acknowledgements here that my research over many years and my contribution to AS 3959 has been a great assistance from the CSIRO's Bushfire Behaviour and Risk team, and also their Bushfire Adaptation team. And I was supported by the Bushfire Building Council of Australia for many years, and also my own university, which I'm no longer part of. And I'd like to thank Standards Australia Committee for especially those members that accepted and adopted my many contributions to the standard over many years. Thank you very much.